Hollywood loves a good prison escape. A tunnel beneath the floorboards, a hidden weapon, or a dramatic helicopter rescue in the dead of night. Real high-security facilities function through redundancy. A single breach, like outsmarting one guard or picking a single lock, fails because there are always more barriers waiting on the other side. Multiple security zones separate inmates from the outside world. There are massive physical walls, overlapping chain-link fences, thousands of feet of razor wire, along with strictly controlled movement and constant surveillance. Escaping requires defeating a perfectly integrated system built to anticipate every human vulnerability. That's why famous prison breakouts are remembered precisely because they are so incredibly rare. For over a century, federal imprisonment looked a lot like the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. These were grand, sprawling institutions built to hold thousands of inmates connected to notorious criminal cases. Inside these large general population units, complex social systems inevitably take root. Inmates form friendships and rivalries. Groups splinter off, and illicit networks and gang activities develop right on the recreation yard. To keep thousands of individuals contained, the facility forces a rigid, unyielding schedule. Time is entirely structured. From waking up, to eating a meal, to taking a shower, everything requires authorization. The outside world runs on personal choice. Prison runs on permission. Navigating this volatile ecosystem falls entirely on correctional officers. Every single day, they manage intense conflicts, search for contraband, and are forced to make split-second decisions that can dictate whether an inmate or a colleague lives or dies. Because officers can't be everywhere at once, modern prisons rely heavily on layers of electronic security. Constant communication monitoring and advanced surveillance are used to gather intelligence and intercept coordinated attacks long before they happen. Strict routines and cameras can manage the masses, but eventually this general population model fails when the system encounters individuals who are simply too dangerous to be allowed any social contact at all. You have to move away from the chaotic, crowded yards and travel into the deepest layer of the criminal justice system, an environment designed for absolute silence. In the mountains of Colorado sits the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, better known as ADX Florence. It is an institution built exclusively for the nation's absolute highest-risk inmates. This is a Supermax. Instead of managing a large ecosystem, the facility relies on severe, permanent isolation. Physical containment is secondary to the total restriction of movement and human contact. The objective here is complete neutralization. An inmate cannot order violence, organize a gang, or influence the outside world if they cannot speak to another living person. For nearly 24 hours a day, inmates live inside a small, poured concrete box. The bed, the desk, and the stool are entirely immovable. Every basic human need is managed through a solid steel door. Meals are delivered directly through a narrow slot, and interactions with guards are tightly scripted. This abstract map illustrates the structure of a standard prison, a large, interconnected social network. In a Supermax, a single individual is entirely severed from that web, walled off from the rest of the population. Even outdoor recreation happens entirely alone in a secure, enclosed area designed to prevent any communication with others. The logic driving this extreme architecture is deeply pragmatic. If crime bosses and violent offenders cannot safely mix with others, separating them protects guards from assault and stops hits from being ordered. As a mechanism of control, a Supermax works exactly as intended. It paralyzes the most dangerous threats by turning the prison into a static, perfectly controlled void. Engineering absolute physical security exacts a psychological price. When human contact is removed for years at a time, inmates frequently struggle with chronic depression, paranoia, and a total loss of the ability to relate to other people. This reality pushed the system to its breaking point in California. Facilities like Pelican Bay became the center of intense public backlash, triggering massive lawsuits and protests against the state's use of indefinite solitary confinement. It creates an almost impossible debate. Advocates argue that prolonged isolation meets the definition of torture. Authorities counter that it remains the only viable method to protect prison staff, other inmates, and national security. Perfecting the physical cage forced a choice that the legal system is still grappling with: whether the preservation of total security justifies the suspension of an inmate's basic human rights. The people locked in these cells have histories of terrorism, organized crime, and severe violence. They are deemed the nation's ultimate threats, but they do not cease to be human beings, which raises a complicated question about what punishment should look like. Where does justice end? Is it the loss of physical freedom, or is it the destruction of the human mind? And there is a chilling reality attached to that question. Many of the individuals subjected to this extreme isolation will eventually finish their sentences and be released back into our communities. America has successfully engineered the inescapable prison, but the true challenge isn't architectural anymore. It's deciding what happens to the people we lock behind those steel doors, long after the rest of the world has forgotten they exist.